Hi, kitty cats. Do you know how to chew? Do you know how to breathe? Can you remember your phone number? Can you walk in a straight line without losing your balance? These are easy problems, right? Of course you can do these things. And even if you can't do them well, this is why we have science and medicine and technology. Who cares? But not knowing how to do these simple actions well leads to long term destruction of your physical health and mental health. Not knowing how to do these simple actions is the root of why humans can't live in peace with each other. They don't seem so simple anymore, do they? And that is what we're going to talk about. How you can't afford the luxury of ignorance of the simple things when your literal life is on the line. So I'm seeing a few people here already. Hello, Genevieve. I see. Oh, Dodgy Archetype. Hi, Dodgy Archetype. Good to see you. I see Angela. I see Fox and Margie. Um, my wife. I don't know if I said my wife, but if I didn't, hi, my wife. So here's my opening bits. I'm Dr. Amethysta Herrick. I am both a scientist and a content creator. I discuss identity and gender through the lens of the scientific method. You can find so much more information about me and the work that I do at my website, which is purplepodclan.com. There's a page there that's just about me. You can find all the social media networks that I'm on and follow me. You can read all the articles that I write on the blog page there. You can go to the podcast page, listen to and watch the podcasts that I record with oh so interesting people. And then there's a page where you can join the Discord server. You can be part of the solution by being part of the discussion. And finally, there is a page about the hypnotherapy work that I do to help people work through some of their issues with identity and gender. Now, if you'd like to support my work, you can get a subscription on the website, purplepodclan.com, for as little as $5 a month. Even if you just go there, you can sign up for my free newsletter that publishes about every 2 weeks. And if what you do is follow me on the social media networks and then like and share what I do, that is such beautiful support, and I love you for it. And finally, I publish other people's work on the website. So if you have your own original work in identity or gender, please email me using the contact page that you will see one more time. I guess it's over here, purplepotclan.com. There you go. All right, did I see anybody else come in? No. So good. So far, so good. Why am I doing this particular live stream? So I'm reading 2 books right now. I'm always reading books. One is called The Art of Memory by an author named Francis Yates. It's actually from 1966. It is literally about memory has been used and developed across history. To be clear, I actually bought it because our kid was interested in making their memory better, but it is not a how-to book, okay? It is fascinating, but it's really how the ancients viewed memory. So it's not something that, it may not be one for you. But the other book that I'm reading, oh, hi, Gigi. The other book is Breath by James Nestor. Now, this is a newer book about breathing and how you're probably doing it wrong. And right now, I just know there's one person out there going, oh, dang, I am now breathing manually. So both of these books are obviously about very basic human experiences. Like, do you really have to sit down and learn how to have a better memory? Do you really have to learn how to breathe? But I love books like this. I have other books. I have a bunch of books on how to run, how to walk properly. It's like stuff you've been doing for decades. I know. But it's always fascinating to see how things have changed. See, Dodgy Archetype right there. You are now breathing manually. And now everybody else is. Sorry about that. Thanks. It's always fascinating to see how things change. With running, it's been very stark, right? So I have these books about running. Foot and leg injuries actually spiked right around the time that Nike introduced their first shoes. We have very good evidence that what Nike created with their negative drops, so the heel higher than the toe, and the thick, foamy soles, we have good evidence that those cause several problems. Issues with balance in the elderly because of loss of proprioception, knowing where your feet are, which leads to more trips and more falls. Now, these are more complicated health issues with several inputs in them, okay? It's not necessarily just shoes. So to return to the 2 books I'm reading right now, What I learned is that humans were different, like really different, not that long ago, a few hundred years. In our pursuit of science and understanding every minuscule detail of the universe, we've gotten ourselves to a point where we neglect the important things so that we can focus on the unimportant. I have a better way to say this. I coined my own little phrase because it's what you have to do. I call this the luxury to fix what doesn't matter. And that tendency to focus on details that mean nothing, it leads directly to the gender debate today. Let me put that in quotation marks, sorry, to the gender debate. When we ignore the bigger picture, we focus on details that do nothing to advance our understanding, and not only has that affected our physical health, it leads directly to poor social health. So tonight, what we're going to talk about is how memory used to be a typical pursuit of education. It's kind of a fascinating story. How human skulls and the way that their structure changed so dramatically over the course of less than about 100 years, and what that ended up doing to our health. And why all of this together, your jaws, your sinuses, your memory, maybe even your shoes, lead to a failure to see a bigger picture, and how that lack of understanding the forest for the trees causes the gender debate. Sorry, gender debate. I have to keep on using quotation fingers. So let's start with memory. Isn't memory just something you have? It turns out that no, memory is absolutely something you can develop. Let me check comments really super fast. Fox, I'm sorry. Everybody is breathing. I shouldn't have said it. And why do I keep bringing it back up? That's the bigger thing. Why am I doing that? I've just got to. While Margie wouldn't mind improving her memory, she's quite actively improving her memories. That was beautiful. Oh, you know what? Hang on. I got a little thing I can do too. I only learned this the other day. I'm going to do this really fast. Just hitting a button. Okay, done. So let's talk about memory. The book I referenced here, okay, is called The Art of Memory, right? It's by Frances Yates. She wrote this book after writing a book about Giordano, struggling with that one, Giordano Bruno. Giordano Bruno was a Renaissance magician. That's probably the best way to describe him. If you've ever studied Hermetic Kabbalah, you have almost certainly seen his name. Bruno talks a lot about remembering a ton of stuff in his work, because magic's kind of like that. You have to remember correspondences and words. In fact, you may be remembering words in languages you never even learned. So memory was crucial to his entire philosophy of magic. We're not talking about that, but since Frances Yates wanted to understand what made memory so important, she wrote a whole book about memory, specifically the history of memory and techniques to develop it, because believe it or not, memory used to be considered as important as actual reasoning. Because, like, how are you supposed to reason if you couldn't remember your argument? So here's a quickie overview here. While the ancient Greeks taught memory techniques, manual breathing, Kabbalah, and the gender debate. So while the Greeks taught ancient memory techniques, it's what we ended up calling memnotechnics, which I kind of like that. Memnotechnics. Technology, which doesn't have to be like electronics, Technology developed to remember stuff. So while they taught techniques to people, we really don't have any of their books, except one. And the title of it is, by the way, For Herenes, which is not that great. But it goes through a technique that the Greeks called the memory palace. I don't know if anybody's heard about this. Here's how a memory palace works. The first step is that you memorize a literal place. Literal place, like a physical place. The Greeks thought that like a temple would work great. So I was thinking about this just trying to use my here's if I'm visualizing this, like I can walk through my front door and I can see the stairs that lead down to our bottom floor. If I walk down those stairs, I can turn to my, what is that? My right. I can visualize this coffee table and a couch and like an easy chair there. If I walk past those, I can visualize this fireplace that would also be on the right, and so on. Now, believe it or not, to remember something, the way this mnemotechnic works, you associate what you need to remember at each of those places. So if I wanted to remember a speech, I'll make this up, okay? If you wanted to remember a speech, I could have a greeting as the front door, like literally opening the speech, right? This is my greeting. You know, steps down like a joke about the sponsor or something, right? You know, you're trying to take a step closer to the audience. The coffee table, right? This is how you introduce a topic, right? You can have like a coffee table book. You can visualize a coffee table book about the topic. You go to the fireplace. That's supposed to be one big argument. You know, this is the burning up of previous knowledge. Maybe you're thinking to yourself, wow, this sounds a whole lot worse than just memorizing a speech. But believe it or not, it works. And memory was considered as important as the other 4 pillars, or a total of 5 pillars of rhetoric. The first one was innovation, the ability to think of an argument. And then the second was arrangement, making a logical series of steps, innovative steps, in order to present a full argument. Style, how you'll actually talk about the arguments. Memory, how you remember the whole damn thing so that you can get to delivery, so that you can be, you know, as charming as you can when you're only wearing a toga, I suppose. Um, I want to jump to a couple of people here because I see some things here. Where to go? Where to go? So memnotechnics. Okay, here we go. Margie says she had a memory palace, but it was sacked by barbarians. Well, you know, there you go. Hello, Stay Mad. Oh, Stay Mad is here. Thank you for sending. Wait, I don't know. What are all these emojis? No idea. Dodgy Archetype asks, have I ever seen a Lucasa memory board? I have not. If you want to drop that into chat, I'd be interested in hearing about it. And here we go. Then Angela says, as a dyslexic, she's able to remember what she reads and sees via television naturally. You probably developed that technique because you struggled to read it, possibly. You know, it's an interesting thought, right? So typically, despite Angela, I feel like I say that a lot, despite Angela's experience, we don't really think about this any longer. We don't really care about remembering things. We don't even remember our own phone number, maybe. I mean, this is true. Actually, I have a Google Voice number for you know, my business, for like my hypnotherapy stuff. I have no idea what it is. I mean, every time I give it to a client or like I text somebody, like I have to look it up. You know, it's oh yeah, here let me tell you my phone number. It's shit. Pick up my phone and get it. You know, the thing is though, if you break one pillar of rhetoric, you weaken the others. By not remembering things, we've gotten much worse at the other things. We've gotten much worse at building on things that we have learned from an article or a podcast. Since we can't build new arguments, we can't structure an original thought. Since we can't structure original thoughts, we don't really have an original voice when we speak about things. And since we have no original voice, we're stuck not being very charming when wearing nothing but a toga. Although I suppose it's possible the charm can come from wearing nothing but a toga, but you better hope that nobody else wants a conversation while you're doing that. Instead, what we're doing is leaning on AI. We're leaning on AI not just to write things like, you know, an email to your boss asking for a raise, and maybe you don't want to do that, but we're leaning on AI not just to write things like emails. We're asking AI to summarize what it thinks are the important parts of a piece of content, or a lot of parts of content. And since we're working from a summary, oftentimes we start trusting AI to make our decisions. That's when things go really, you know? It seems like a silly thing to do to develop mnemotechnics, right? But memory is one of the very fundamental uses. It's one of the very it's one of the things we use as a very fundamental part of our human experience. And yes, I know we have books. I know we have the internet. I know that we have supercomputers in our pockets so we can just ask search engines. But what else have we lost? Because it's been a lot. Now that has been inside our heads. What about our physical health? What very basic actions have we completely neglected? Turns out it doesn't get much more basic than eating and breathing. But let me look at comments here. Let's see what we got. Oh, so Stay Mad actually just sent me insults. Well, you're a jerk, Stay Mad. I'm glad you left. B. Arthur Energy is here. That's great. Oh, great. Yes. So Gigi shows, yeah, there's a good example of a memory palace in an episode of Sherlock Holmes, the Benedict Cumberbatch Sherlock Holmes, which I have never seen that whole, like a whole episode, but that looks phenomenal. I don't know if Angela, I know you're in the UK. I would love to see that thing. But yes, this memory palace was a huge thing. I mentioned there was really only one book that we had. Turns out Cicero, whom I believe was Roman, not Greek, but Cicero was a huge fan of memory because he was kind of like, how are you going to go and talk and make good arguments unless you do memory? And so the book that I'm talking to ended up being attributed to Cicero. It's like wasn't even his, but he ended up being given credit for this book that somebody else wrote. So anyway, the memory palace is a big, huge thing. That was like you can still get books on this today, new books about this today, but we don't know exactly how the Greeks would have used this initially because it was so basic, it's so fundamental. It was like the kind of thing like if in kindergarten they give you like, Pat the Pilot. I'm trying to think of like the one book that I used to see. There was like Pat the Pilot. It was like a reading primer, right? You're not seeing Pat the Pilot at every like in universities because it was so basic. They're like, well, of course you can read. Of course you can read. We're just going to assume that. And so it was assumed that the mnemotechnics were just taught. So, Angela, Angela says she knows she's odd. You're odd in all the most beautiful ways. I just want to make sure that you to make that clear. So Margie says she remembers her phone number from 1983, but neither one of her current partner's numbers right now. Yeah, see? When I was growing up, my phone number was 805-252-7535. I am 56 years old. That is a telephone number my mother had before I was born, and I can remember that. But my Google Voice number, I have no idea because I didn't have to memorize it, right? And there we go. See, this is a great idea. Gigi then says some people memorize a poem a week to keep their memory going. I think it's a phenomenal idea. Ooh, I want to ask this question. Angela says her ability to analyze information and use it has improved with age. I'm curious because I think my ability to take in information, pull it apart, to analyze it, let's use analyze, and use it has improved with transition. Did that happen to you, Angela? I'm curious. Or anybody? I'm curious. I'm just gonna pop that up. Sorry. Margie says in her personal life, sorry, I'm just looking at the next comment. In her personal life, she's understood a great deal of varied things, and associating between disparate disciplines has often been powerful. I think so. Disparate disciplines in particular, right? You try to look for connections. How does one thing translate into something else? And I think that's why when you look at rhetoric, like it really has nothing to do with the arguments so much. It has to do with how ultimately to speak, to be compelling, which I guess is what good rhetoric is, but I'm cracking up about this. Cicero did write the famous words, lorem ipsum dolor sit amet. No. Hello, spaghetti guys. Good to see you. All right, let's talk about, so we talked about the art of memory. Now we're going to talk about this other book, which is called Breath. This is by an author called James Nestor. This one's newer. You know, the Francis Yates one was a little old. This one's newer, but it's really no less philosophical. Because it turns out that way back in the early days, we used to consider how to breathe in order to be healthy. I mean, it sounds kind of counterintuitive, right? Like, don't you just breathe? Isn't there? There's no real technique. Like, you don't really need any skill in breathing. Well, no. If you go back, you know, there's a little bit of uncertainty in these numbers, but if you go back on the order of, 2,000, 3,000 years, in India, China, Japan, and South America, oddly, right about the same time, give or take, a couple of centuries, they wrote down techniques on why breath is so important. Now, I actually talked about this in a live stream long ago. Well, I don't know, yeah, some months ago. All of those cultures believed that life was driven by like one single force. In India, it was called prana. In China, it's called chi. In Japan, it's called ki. In South America, it was called orenda. But in Western society, today, allopathic medicine, we don't have any idea of a life force. That's what I talked about, because that's too dang woo-woo for science. With all of our technology and, medicine and scientists and stuff, do we really have to worry about life forces? If you look at human skulls from not that long ago, yeah, maybe it's worth thinking about. How does that follow? If you look at human skulls from running on, say, 500 years ago, let's say, 500, 300 or older skulls, and bear in mind, we actually have scads of these. Okay, we got tons and tons. The second outbreak of the bubonic plague in Europe was in the 1300s, so there's about 700 years ago. But there were recurring outbreaks of the bubonic plague in the 1500s, in the 1600s, and in the 1700s, right up to around the time of the Renaissance, basically all the way up to the Industrial Revolution. And this makes some sense, right? You're entering the age of reason. We learned how to solve problems of hygiene, those stupid people from long ago, And what it allowed us to do was pack more humans into less space. That's an important point. But let me. I'm seeing a few comments, and I want to pick them up. Spaghetti Guy says having better memory after transition might be because less energy goes into dysphoria. I think there is really something to that. Yes, I think also there was you hear about the brain fog that something like hormone therapy addresses, and I think that's really real. So I think that was part of it. I know I had less energy that went into, trying to mask whatever. So I think there's a few things that could have gone into it. So, Angela says she transitioned 30 years ago, so it doesn't count. It's just improved as she's gotten older. Okay, I mean, I guess that's good. Oh, actually, interesting. So Genevieve says her memory got worse. Interesting. And of course, Margie says hers got worse too, but conveniently she was able to forget that. It's good. Here's another excellent point. Yes, right. Spaghetti Guys brings up that in the Christian religion, God actually creates life through breath. Right, the way that I think it's translated, and I'm gonna probably say this poorly, but the way it reads in Hebrew is that the Christian deity breathed life into the nostrils of Adam, breathe life into these nostrils he'd created out of clay. So it's a fascinating point. I didn't mention Hebrew. Hebrew also has a word for the life force, which is a ruach. I'm not great with my Hebrew, but um, so yeah, we've got quite a few. We've got prana, we've got ruach, we've got orenda. How many other languages do I can't really speak Chinese or Japanese, so there you go. But it did have a tremendous importance. So we can look at skulls, right? We can look at skulls going back at least 300 years and see what they looked like. Um, Once we hit the Renaissance, once we solved a couple of problems of hygiene, things like that, it gave us the ability to stuff humans into small spaces, okay? When you have loads of people in less space, say London, suddenly you have less space for growing food. That meant fewer people grew food. Fewer people would cook fresh food. And what that meant is that you had other people cooking food, which meant we started to eat much softer foods. And it happened before the Industrial Revolution, but it certainly accelerated right around that time. And what do we see in human skulls after about this bubonic plague? Um, because there are huge ossuaries beneath Paris. I mentioned London, but there are huge ossuaries under um, Paris because they were just like, we don't even know what to do with these bodies. Just like chuck them in a hole. Let's just hope that we're not going to end up any worse off. Just chuck them in a hole, okay? So we've got like literally possibly millions of skulls that could be dated back to like the 1300s underneath, in like catacombs in Paris. It's pretty fascinating, isn't it? Um, oh, thank you, Garrett. Oh my gosh. Liz. Garrett says, I'm so knowledgeable about everything. I don't know about everything, but if you look at skulls from about the 1700s backward, the teeth are stunningly straight. They're not crooked at all. Every skull has amazingly straight teeth. You'll also notice that the jaws are strong and wide because they've been eating food that had to be chewed thoroughly, right? They might have been eating, raw turnips, who knows? But they were eating things that they had to chew thoroughly. And because the jaws were large and strong, there was plenty of room for the teeth, which is why the teeth were not crooked, but there's also plenty of room in the skull for breathing passages, right? Your sinuses, right back there. There was plenty of room for the nose, good sized nostrils. There was plenty of room for passages that lead down to the esophagus and into the lungs. Now, maybe you're going to say, whoopty shit. Who cares? Right? I have an orthodontist. I can fix my crooked teeth. That's not exactly a bubonic plague pandemic, not exactly a crisis. True, but smaller breathing passages lead directly to chronic sinus infections. That actually leads to a whole lot of things that get into your stomach and into your throat. That leads to irritation of the throat and stomach. It also leads to chronic migraines. And guess what? All of that leads to faster and shallower breathing. So we've decreased the efficiency of breathing. It decreases the efficiency of respiration. So respiration, actually getting the oxygen somewhere to do something with it. It skews your metabolism. Believe it or not breathing well can lead to higher blood pressure, to weight gain, to lower just in general fitness, right? The VO2 max, it's called. Hang on one second here, too. Well, give me 1 second, Dodgy Archetype, and I will indeed give you the reference. So higher blood pressure, weight gain, lower fitness. It also leads to anxiety, greater depression, all of the issues that come along with that. Over the course of 300 years, because we started to eat processed food, we need more than just an orthodontist. We need, at this point, a whole troop of healthcare professionals to take care of us. And a weird thing, seriously, you can learn to open up the mouth a bit. My kid came home at some point and said, "Oh, I'm mewing." And it turns out, this is like a looks maxing thing. It turns out, this is not just the kids talking about mewing. It comes from a technique developed by a British dentist named John Mew, who used jaw expanders and harder foods to fix a whole lot of issues, like a stunning number of issues. And before you go, oh yeah, it was like, the Middle Ages. No, like he died a couple of years ago. Like he was also in his 90s, I think. So maybe he knew something about long life. You can learn to open up your mouth a bit. You can learn to open up the actual, like, the mouth bit, and you can learn to breathe more efficiently, to breathe more effectively. Doing so actually opens up your breathing passages naturally. Opening up your breathing passages fixes a multitude of issues. Learning to breathe slower and less can change your metabolism dramatically. At least one person's going to go, yeah, if you stop your breathing entirely, yeah, it can change your metabolism. No. No, there's a lot of things. I'm not even going to go into all of them. There's an interesting tidbit. When I was running a whole lot, I used to have a higher blood concentration of carbon dioxide. And it started to go down as I started to transition and as I put on weight. My blood carbon dioxide decreased. And I was like, who cares? Like, you don't want carbon dioxide in your blood, you want oxygen. It turns out, actually, blood concentration of carbon dioxide is an indication of the pH in your blood. Acts as carbonic acid. If you want the chemistry, we can talk about it. But the point is that the carbon dioxide acts as a signal to your body to use the oxygen that you're breathing. So if you have low blood carbon dioxide, your blood actually can take in more oxygen, but what it does is it doesn't get used. You breathe it right back out. That's why your metabolism changes so dramatically. Um, so hang on. Let me read some of these things here because I know there was something Dodgy Archetype said. See, this is amazing. So Angela says she's learned over time that if her body or mind is unwell, she can take control to help heal herself. I mean, this is what, like, people like hardcore yogis do. I mean, we have people. Wim Hof is another one. I mean, he's just some dude from Finland, Sweden. But we have people who can, like, change, the temperature of their body. There are like Tibetan monks. I didn't even mention, like, Tibet. I only said China, but there are monks, Buddhist monks, and Margie even mentions she manipulates chi routinely during massage and therapeutic touch. There are Buddhist monks you can stick them in, like, on a block of ice. They will not get frostbite because they can manipulate their temperature that well. These are things we can do with our bodies if we learn how to do it. So here's what Margie says. Even with her rigorous physics-oriented worldview, she's compelled to accept that chi appears to exist, even if she has no physical explanation for it. I am going to get there, okay? Because I feel the same. But there's a reason why I'm talking about this, and ultimately that's about what I'm talking about. So Darji Archetype says, do I have a source for I believe the dental stuff, because then they go on to say their understanding is that our dental abilities are much better to the point that we get wisdom fractures more often because we're not losing teeth we otherwise would be. So the source that I have is this James Nestor book. I won't kid you, I have not done a lot of study on this. I do know that one of the things that occurs when eating softer food when you're younger is that your jaw can be pushed back, and it will be smaller if you don't eat, harder foods. As a result, the jaw being smaller, it's harder to stick wisdom teeth in there. It's hard to stick a lot of teeth in there. Um, so I can't really I don't know. Like, I'm not an expert on that part. I'm not going to say that. But what I will say is that if you look at skulls, um, we see jaws that aren't crowding teeth. So I don't know. It says something to me. So James Nestor, breath. Hopefully you'll see that dodgy archetype. It's actually a pretty interesting book. So Garrett asks, is G quantum intelligence? No, that is literally the Chinese word for life force. Really, it's like India's prana. It's like if you hear somebody say kiai in when they're practicing karate, things like that. What do we got? So, yeah, Spaghetti says anxiety and breathing is definitely linked. There's, I was thinking about this too as I was reading this. When I how about if I just say when I spiral downhill? When I spiral downhill, first of all, what happens is I breathe really shallow and fast, right? My heart's pounding, there's like panic attack type symptoms. And after that, it lasts a couple of days. And one of the things that I notice is that when I have a panic attack type symptoms, what it does is actually my voice gets kind of weird. Like the resonance changes. There's a lot of things. And I wonder, because when I started reading this book, you want to talk about manually breathing. Oh my gosh. I picked up this book and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't read this book without breathing manually. But I found that if I breathe only through my nose, my voice changed. It's a weird thing. Like all of a sudden I had more agility in my voice, how to use my voice. So anyway, I don't know if now that when I start to spiral downhill, my voice changes because I breathe strangely, and it takes a while for me to go back to a more natural breathing pattern. But I don't know. I think there's a ton of things that are connected to this. Um, and here's so hyperventilating. So hyperventilating, what that does, an interesting tidbit, is increase the level of oxygen in your blood and decrease the carbon dioxide in your blood. And so you go dizzy in part because you're not using the oxygen that you're bringing in. Isn't that weird? The other one too, what was the other one I was going to say? Hypoventilation. There's a Russian guy. I don't want to talk all about this, but I read a book by this Russian guy. Bucheko is his name. Can't think of his first name. Bucheko found that if you breathe less, you actually can improve a ton of metabolic processes going on in the human body. Hypoventilating. So it's actually breathing less, breathing slowly and shallowly, which sounds awful. I know, but you can develop this. It's weird. And then so Margie says she uses extremely drawn out exhalations, and that's a great idea. So you pursing your lips to partially occlude your the exhalations. So there you go. The thing is, yeah, breathing in and breathing out slowly, deep breaths, stimulate the vagus nerve, as Margie's got there, the vagus nerve, and that is connected to your parasympathetic nervous system that calms you down and stuff. Oof. It's good stuff. All good stuff. Oh, hey, Frybird. Yes. See, here we go. Bread used to be a whole lot harder. Well, I mean, so did all the vegetables, right? I mean, today we're not, they didn't have like Twinkies, right? In the 1700s. There's other things. So, anyway, yeah, so Darji Archetype says they know the historical record shows less overbites compared to these days. Yeah, because I think jaws were moved forward just from chewing. So, Jamie, hey Jamie. Jamie says, did I hear that Missouri defeated 50 plus anti-transgender bills? I haven't heard about that, but that's an awesome. Was that what you just sent me, by the way? I saw you sent me a message. I have yet to read it, but Um, it's same happened in Georgia, by the way. It's weird, both Missouri and Georgia. Um, so Garrett says a book that could pair well with this convo is Breath by James Nestor. This is where I'm getting all of this, actually. It's a big one. So um, I think it's a great one. So anyway, let me move on. What I wanted to mention. I'm talking about these two topics because of what I've just called the luxury to fix what doesn't matter. In the case of shoes, these are great comments, by the way. Thank you so much for all the comments. I'm about, whole live stream's going to be just responding to comments. But I talked about breath, and I talked about shoes. I talked about memory, because we now have this luxury to fix the things that don't matter. If you look at shoes, like, you can go to a podiatrist. If you have bad balance, you can install banisters all over. You can get a higher bed so it's easier for you to stand up. Or you could strengthen your feet and your ankles by walking barefoot for a few months. What seems easier to you? In the case of memory, you can trust AI, right? You can not bother to think very deeply, and you can hope that our robot overlords are going to be kind to you. Or you could develop your memory. You could read books over the course of your life. Which seems easier? In the case of physical health, mental health, you can find an orthodontist, you can find a surgeon who can open up your breathing passages, you can find a GP to prescribe you migraine medications. You can eat foods that take no effort to chew and offer no nutrition. You can live with your high blood pressure, your anxiety, your depression. You can find doctors to prescribe medications for all of those. Or you can eat more challenging foods. You can learn to breathe effectively and efficiently. What sounds easier to fix? And I know, before you put something in the comments, oops, I need to actually get rid of that one thing there. I know it's not always as simple as what I'm saying here. There are systemic obstacles. There may be congenital obstacles. And who knows? Maybe there are some people in the entire healthcare establishment who would prefer that you didn't know the simple fixes to these problems. But leaving that out, what happens is we trust science. And I'm like a scientist, right? Like, that's my whole brand. You can trust me, I'm a scientist. I talk about these things because I have the authority of somebody who might be able to understand these things. And I mean that too. I mean, you really can trust me. I'm not a stakeholder in this entire healthcare empire. But at the end of the day, what are we doing? We cause ourselves symptoms that we could fix. But instead of addressing the problem, we look for ways to mitigate the symptoms. We focus on the details that make no difference whatsoever. You can fix your crooked teeth with orthodontics, but it's not going to change your blood pressure. You can trust your robot overlords, but it's not necessarily going to help you find and keep your job. Today we have the luxury to focus our attention on details that literally mean nothing. And don't misunderstand me, it's interesting to study these things, right? And we should. We should study them to know why they happened. But what we want to do is study them to know why they happened so we can stop them from happening in the first place. This is a mindset. And I don't mean that in a growth versus fixed mindset necessarily, but it's a mindset to focus your attention on details that mean nothing. The mindset is that we can address symptoms, not problems. It's a mindset that we can afford to be foolish about many topics rather than be intelligent about one. Who's to blame here? Well, science. We teach that we need to break down every problem into component parts. We teach that the sum of the parts is always greater than the whole, but the opposite turns out to be true. The sum of the pieces is no solution at all when the whole didn't need to fall apart in the first place. So we see this today both in politics, religion, specifically politics, and also with the way the queer community is handled. And I'm 45 minutes in getting to my point. We break down the human experience not to understand it, but in order to dismantle it. So I've got one last section here about sex, gender, and the whole human experience. Let me check these comments first. So Angela says she had to lose 4 teeth when she was young because she had too many. In part because that means you had too many for the size of your jaw. Because I mean, my sister was the same. I was the same. I had teeth pulled when I got orthodontics. And here you go. Fox mentions that cortisol from panic attacks takes days to leave the system. Yeah. I'm interested in what this means. Angela says she decided to improve her feminine voice by changing where it comes in her body, and after 2 years of practice, it's sort of female. I'm curious what that means. By changing where it comes in your body, I want to know what that means. Oh, here you go. Okay, so Dodgy Archetype says you're skimming through. Yeah, James, the original Breath was 2020. I am reading a Kindle edition, but yeah, the paperback came out in 2024, 5, I think. It is really fascinating. It was and the thing is too, see, for some reason, I have a fascination with breath. I'm trying to figure out how much I really want to say there, and there were parts that I went, nah, hold that back. But I have a fascination with breath. I have the fascination with being able to move energy through breath, which is, one of a yogic technique that I learned, a decade ago, whatever. But so I have a fascination with it. It was a good book, really good book. So Spaghetti Guy says this might be a social issue where too focuses a society on such solutions instead of other options. Yeah, I think our problem is that we focus on. See, we're not focusing on solutions. Let me reel back what I was about to say. I don't think we're focused on solutions. We're focused on mitigating symptoms, and that's different from offering a solution. Because here's a great point. Angela says you shouldn't always trust science. You have to analyze how they came up with a convoy. Oh, hey, Alex. And this is, here we go. So she doesn't always believe what science says until she analyzes how the conclusion is reached. As we should. It was an interesting, oh gosh, I'm running low on time. Let me move on. I was going to go off on another story. All right, I want to talk about the gender debate. The gender debate. I got to stick it into quotes again. The gender debate. At the end of it, it has really very little content to it. The debate's essentially, do humans have gender? If they do, can they choose it? If they do, is it encoded in our genetics? And really, either way, how do we regulate it? But guess what? Before the whole debate ever started, early biologists had observed nature. Early biologists understood what defined sexual reproduction, and in doing that, defined the word sex very clearly. And in defining the word sex very clearly, they distinguished it. They separated it very cleanly from gender. And no, I will admit, early biologists did not use the word gender. We heard on a live stream on Sunday that's like a 60-year-old word, that it came into vogue, 60 years ago. But it doesn't take coining a word or a phrase to observe a phenomenon in nature. Coining a word or a phrase only gives it a label. And that, in my opinion, is where things start to go pear-shaped. Different people want to define a label different ways. What does transgender mean? What does gender mean? People want to redefine these terms over and over and over again. And at some point, doing so divorces the meaning of the label from the observations that drove its creation. So now here we are talking the gender debate. Sorry, gender debate. I have to keep. Now we're worrying about public restrooms. We're worried about children's sports. It used to be, I remember back when, we were really concerned, should a gay partner be covered by health insurance? Maybe to get orthodontics. We tear down. It's not in the past. We tear down how nature works into smaller and smaller pieces and end up creating details that make no difference whatsoever. There is clearly widespread misunderstanding of the words sex and gender to the point that we're writing executive orders about, not we, but some people are writing executive orders. In worrying about the symptoms of our misunderstanding, in worrying about our inability to recognize what happens in nature all the way around us, we've separated ourselves further and further and further from the common source of truth. And of course, I did a live stream where I talked about how we don't care about what is true, we care about truth. We don't care about what we observe in nature, what ostensibly, I suppose, what we might call true. Luckily, I don't think that Anita is here to pelt me with ontology and epistemology, but we care about what makes the most sense for us. It's what we want to be truth, and then we want other people to agree with us. So the gender debate is a symptom of our over-reliance on bastardized science. We think because we have science, we obviously know everything. We think the simple fixes to problems couldn't possibly be right. We think the people in the past must have been dumber than we are. Clearly, they were dumber than we are, and unfortunately, what that means is we've blinded ourselves to our own ignorance. We can't walk, we can't run without injuring ourselves, we can't chew, we can't breathe, we can't think, we can't remember anything. We label everything so that we can analyze it out of context, so that by analyzing out of context, we can judge everything out of context, and as a result, we have no ability to live together in peace, and this is our enlightened state. We're dumber than people were in the past. Frankly, if this is the pinnacle of humanity, I want no part of it. We must understand that all experiences are part of the human experience. Humans do not have the luxury to remain ignorant. Humans cannot only mitigate symptoms to little benefit. Humans must learn that there are bigger lessons out there, because it's our only hope of survival. Ooh, came to a head there, didn't it? That was all I had to discuss tonight. I also said, when I said, if this is the pinnacle of humanity, I want no part of it. There's a great line by Tori Amos. If the divine master plan is perfection, maybe next time I'll give Judas a try. Pretty good line there. Reminded me of it. Okay, I see. So Angela says her voice came from her chest, changed it by making her voice come from her head. Margie says that's resonance. She bet she'd benefit from some sessions with Jasmine. Well, there's probably no doubt that anybody can benefit from sessions with Jasmine. That being said, it's not all resonance. Changing where... Nah, I'm not going to go into it. Here we go. So Darchi Archetype says people like to talk about biological sex as though sex could be anything else. This is the great part of that phrase, biological sex. The people who coined that phrase were not biologists. They were gender critical people. And we had a whole conversation on the Discord server that said, well, wouldn't those two be the same? Wouldn't a biologist's definition of sex and biological sex be the same thing? And they aren't. That's the thing. You had gender critical people who said, well, we mean biological sex. And they don't have a definition for this. Not at all. There is an actual definition by early biologists, as I mentioned, But that's not what these people mean when they say biological sex, because they want to equate sex with gender. They pretend biological sex means the gender that we have right now. Well, let me rephrase that. The sex that you were assigned at birth, which is not the same as the sex that biologists defined before. This is a political concept, right? Sex is absolutely biology, but the phrase biological sex is part of the gender debate. And it means nothing. I got a whole live stream about that. um, but yes, it strongly implies the two are different. Yes, right. And so that's the thing. The gender critical argument is that when you separate sex and gender, you must be wrong. There's only one concept. Sex is identical to gender. And that's why they have to say, well, okay, since sex is identical to gender, and we say, well, here's our gender, they go, well, we mean biological sex, which in some way apparently means something. I've even, like, it's just so, they're so nonsensical. Hey. You are not an inorganic woman. I strongly suspect you are carbon-based as opposed to silicon-based, but whatever. Thank you. So Gigi brings up, yeah, there was a New Yorker article, Why is the American Diet So Deadly? There are actually quite a few, things that I could say about nutrition and whatever. If I do, however, I feel really confident somebody's going to go, you're kind of chubby. Are you really the one to tell us about nutrition and health? No, that's why I talk about genetics. um, Intelligence without wisdom. That is exactly what it is. Thank you. That's a beautiful way of putting it. We come up with a ton of facts, but we never think, what do these facts mean? Life, oh gosh. Spaghetti Guy says life being continuous progress is a myth. Right. We have to have times of rest. Our Earth does it. Why would we think we were any different? But no. Well, yeah. Well, so here we go. So Spaghetti Geist, you're right. I don't think the gender critical people understand the biologist's definition of sex. You did, however, bring up there's only two sexes, and that's bull. It is dependent upon the species, first of all, but in humans, we do observe only two gametes. But there's a big difference between sex and gender, and even if we did say there are only two sexes, because sex and gender are not the same thing, because they are actually sort of like figuring ground, who the hell cares? Is really the point. Great. Are there two sexes? Are there 1,000 sexes? Doesn't really make a difference because sex and gender are different things in biology. So, yeah, thanks that there are only two sexes. Whoop-de shit, as I like to say. Yeah. Okay. It's almost 6 o'clock where I am. I'm going to take a 5-minute break. Hopefully this was a fun talk. Hopefully there was some interesting stuff. The book by James Nestor is really fascinating. Has a lot of really good stuff in it. A ton of techniques for developing your own breath stuff. And then you can go to yogic techniques. There's a bajillion different pranayama techniques. What Margie described is one of them, but there's a bajillion of them. Where's I going to go with that? So that was a good book. The Art of Memory, fascinating. I'm not sure if that's the one that you're going to go, yeah, this is going to be great. It's something that you read in, just like for fun. It might help you get to sleep, but there you go. So, all right, I'm going to take a 5-minute break. We'll pull up the game because why not, right? Because hopefully that's fun. And that's it. All right, I'll be right back. 5 minutes.